All right, hey folks, welcome back to another First Loop demo day. My name is Jake, I'm CEO of First Loop. First Loop is a AI first software development agency, and here in the Demo Day podcast, we are bringing you to the cutting edge of the tools, techniques, and products that Cody and I are using to deliver client work and build our own products. I'm joined today by Cody, CTO of First Loop, who will be walking us through the autonomous Wiki editing agent that he has built. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Cody.
Cool. Just to provide some background here, Jake and I have a dedicated Discord channel where we talk about all of the latest and greatest news and developments and ideas that we're having related to AI automation. The problem we had was all of these great discussions were being lost to the bits of Discord. We'd have them every day and things would be evolving rapidly. Unless we took the time to actually go in and catalog all of those discussions ourselves, it was pretty much lost forever. So if we wanted to refer to it again, we're either searching back through Discord or just trying to recall through memory, which, at least for me, isn't always the most reliable. So just to give a quick overview of what this actually looks like, we've essentially just got this wiki set up. We've deployed it on Railway. This uses MK Docs, which is just a markdown-based wiki platform. It's all checked into GitHub. You can actually see the source code over here. This isn't public source yet, but we'll eventually get there. We actually dive down in to some of this markdown code. For example, the daily log, we click one of these. Everything on this wiki is just represented in markdown text, which is convenient because Claude and really just large language models at large are really good with working in markdown. In short, this agent runs in the background, so it's an ambient agent. It's constantly scraping our Discord channel, looking for new conversations, and following some general structures we've set up on this wiki. You can see we've got an agent section, application section, where we actually talk about complete end-to-end tools we built, building blocks sections, where we get into maybe some of the more discrete tools that we're using and how we use them, as well as experiments, which is kind of the bulk of the updates today. We kind of defined that high-level structure for the wiki, and really at that point, just let Claude take over. So we provided some of those system level instructions just to let it know how it's set up. And it does its best to really just maintain this entire wiki on its own. So it's trying to find, if we're talking about video clip generation, for example, it might try to tie that back to our video clip generator experiment we've been working with, as well as all these other miscellaneous tools and discussions that experiments have spiraled out from. But yeah, that's kind of a high-level overview there.
Yeah, quick question on that last part. You're talking about the video clip generation. So when the agent goes to update the wiki, it's able to both read the Discord messages and the existing contents of the wiki then, and kind of work with both in its context at the same time?
Exactly. So this all runs in a GitHub action. So in short, what happens is, like any GitHub action, we sync the latest main commit. So that's pulled down onto the container that the GitHub action is running. So just through your ordinary Claude Code tools, where Claude Code can access the file system, it's got access to all the source code for the wiki because Claude is essentially running in that container alongside everything else in the GitHub actions. So there's really nothing too fancy set up there in terms of how it actually accesses it. And that's also how all of the source code modifications happen, is just through those baked in file system tools that Claude Code exposes. Which kind of, without derailing too much here, gets into some of the value that Claude Code provides. Some folks might be wondering, why build all this stuff on top of Claude Code? And it's really the package and all of the kind of nice peripherals that just come with Claude Code out of the box. So if you could imagine trying to set up an LLM, maybe you're using OpenAI, just the APIs with the AI SDK, you're not going to have all of those file system tools just ready at your disposal. Those would actually need to be defined by you, or you'd need to use MCP servers. Maybe the GitHub MCP server would work for this. But in general, Claude Code just comes with a lot of that out of the box. So you also mentioned the Discord messages. We just have a very lightweight custom MCP server that we run locally with a bot token that gives Claude access to very specific messages. So it doesn't even have to really guess on the threat or the timeline that it's querying messages from, because we just expose a function that says get all of the
Mm,
Discord messages since the last time you ran. And it's kind of nice because if folks have played around with MCPs, some of the official MCP servers can be kind of bloated with tools.
yeah.
And in this case, we just needed one, and we don't even need Claude to guess at which messages to query because we know exactly which channel the messages are in, and we know exactly what was the most recent message that it actually queried. So all we needed is one tool,
Yeah.
in addition to some tools for posting updates and things to the Discord channel itself. But yeah, in short, Claude Code makes it really easy to handle all of the reads and writes and discovery of what's on the wiki, as well as plugging into that custom MCP server.
Yeah. I feel like that's like an important part of the MCP server versus just a REST API discussion, is that like an MCP server, you shouldn't just have it be the whole open API spec for that endpoint. Like you want it to be dialed in and curtailed to what the agent needs to do. And I think sometimes that's missing in that discussion overall.
Definitely. I think people are slowly catching on that MCP servers just at large can contribute to a large percentage of context consumption. I know Cloud Code now has a context tool built in where you can see the breakdown of
Mm,
what MCPs will actually consume. But you're totally right. You think of even the tools that come pre-baked in Claude Code. We don't even need all of those in this specific case.
yep.
You're already getting some bloat there, but especially if you look at, I think the GitHub MCP server is a good example of bloat. You can do a lot of really cool things with it, and generally Claude seems to do well at understanding which each of the individual tools are for, but there's about 50 tools in there. And I
Hmm.
believe I need to refer to the docs, but I believe there's a way to actually specify the tools you want to expose at startup. So they've kind of built that into, I think it's just like a command line argument you can specify for the standard IO MCP server if you're running it locally, just to try to keep some of that context down.
Yeah. Continuing on that thread of MCP servers, what does it look like to add additional functionality? Like I'm a big Twitter X user, and I just like dump links in there. I'm assuming that the agent currently can't grab those links, but what does it look like to add functionality so I could scrape Twitter links?
Yeah, so there's a few options there. I think it's always going to go through MCP, just giving Claude a tool where it can pass in a link and get the scraped output directly is probably the best way to go. And of course, from our experiences with Carrot, we know there's numbers of ways to do that. There's some tools that will just attempt to scrape websites directly. Those don't always work,
Yep.
especially I think Twitter. Does Twitter do kind of a, I wouldn't call it a paywall, but an auth wall, right? Where you can't
Yeah.
actually view everything. So in that case, what I would consider doing is rolling our own MCP server where we can either bake in our own credentials to it, just to avoid paying for Twitter's somewhat expensive API and try to access it that way. Otherwise, of course, we could just plug in the specific APIs that Twitter exposes to retrieve
Mm.
that data and scrape it that way. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Twitter API, that's a story for another day, but it's definitely expensive. But I do wonder, because you use like the Playwright MCP server, spin up a
Mhm.
Chrome browser, log in, and have it pull that down. That add a bunch of complexity, and who knows if it would get the login credentials correct, or if you have like MFA, that might cause issues. But it almost makes me wonder if we should have a throwaway Twitter account that is only used to scrape posts, and we can plug that into the MCP server. Then I think that could be kind of nice.
Yeah. And, getting onto the Playwright piece, I believe there are ways to preserve sessions
Mm,
across runs. So there might even be a world where this agent kind of gets its own general computer use tools where it can, it's almost got like its own browser, long-lived browser with all the SSO and cached credentials that it can just launch. And maybe we even leave the history there so it can kind of return to where it left off the last time it ran. But yeah, totally. The playwright stuff is an interesting way to go. And we've been playing around with that a little bit with the Claude Code test runner for folks that missed the first episode. It's a bit slow. It requires a lot of actions to actually scrape things. But if we could just get it authenticated and kind of have that context preserved across runs,
Yeah.
then it's just feeding in a URL. And Playwright just has a tool that says, open this URL. And so we could kind of just get there pretty easily if we didn't have to do the whole sign-in flow.
Yeah. So the next thing that I'm curious about is, like, we're using this internally. It's a good way to just collect all of the random stuff that we're tossing in this Discord channel. But what are the other types of use cases that we could imagine for this? And, like, the first thing comes to mind is like a corporate team that has some sort of process that they need to update. They do a sales call and then they have notes from that call and there's actions they need to take after that. Like, is this a foundation for taking those types of actions, or, just updating internal documentation?
Totally. I think we're already partially there. I think most meeting tools already have some mechanism for creating a transcript and then doing some distillation of the discussion into notes, which that's part of it, I guess, just taking notes for a meeting. But anyone who's worked a real job, like you said, there's going to be concrete actions that come from it, such as updating public docs or updating a spec. So we totally get into that realm of possibilities here. I think back to some of my corporate engineering jobs, and we would have discussions where we really just kind of drilled into architecture and pretty concrete nitty-gritty stuff there that would be directly impacting to public documentation, either because that documentation doesn't exist or maybe it's outdated, something like that. I could totally see this slotting in there. And for the companies that are a bit more sensitive, we just have this running and committing source code changes directly to main and deploying without any oversight. With what for us, because we're a two-man team, this is we're moving fast and loose, but Cloud isn't perfect. It's not going to get everything right. For some teams, that's just not going to be acceptable. So an option is, rather than committing directly to main, is just creating pull requests directly to main so that it can be reviewed. This is where having kind of documentation and source code becomes really nice, is that these agents kind of just plug and play with it. It gets a little bit more complicated for folks using OneNote, things like that, because you don't get to maintain the version control and some of the code review capabilities. But for ordinary engineering teams with good documentation hygiene, where it's all in source code, this could totally work.
Yeah, I really wonder I think Git is just going to eat everything for the foreseeable future. Like, all of the Claude Code sub-agents and slash commands, like, those are markdown files. That's stuff that could be in source code. Like, defining agents is really going to end up being writing markdown files, and they work so well with Git in the first place and with markdown that, like, the more operations you can have in markdown, the more this first generations of agents are going to be able to supercharge your work.
Totally. And it just kind of begs the question of, what for these systems where you don't have really good edit history or you don't have built-in review mechanisms, I feel like we're still a decent ways away from having AI agents run fully out of the loop with humans.
Yeah.
What does that mean for these systems that don't have built-in checks or just ways of reverting changes? Source code is perfect because you get multiple levels of checks. You get pull requests if you want them, where you can make sure that everything is up to your standards before it gets checked in. But you also have the whole Git commit history. So if something goes haywire or a change goes in that you don't want or don't like or find out was incorrect, you can just revert that with the click of a button and go back to everything prior to when the AI agent was introduced. So what do you do with systems that don't have all of those nice things?
I was just saying, like, someone's going to make $1 billion company and it's just version control for PowerPoint. And it's just version control to make PowerPoint accessible to agents.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's suggestions and things built in, but it's very much centered. A lot of those tools are very much centered around one owner driving all the edits. And especially with things like Word and Excel, where collaboration becomes a lot harder. At least in PowerPoint, if you wanted to, you could be working on different slides at the same time.
Yeah.
Some of these other document formats aren't quite as easy to do that with. So yeah, how does that work when we start introducing agents across all of these tools? Do they just have
Yeah.
to work fully independently? Do we have to build out entire sidecar experiences? What does that even look like? I don't even know what those files look like in text format, if that's even a possibility of maintaining them in source control like that without just committing kind of the whole file at once.
Yeah, I think they're like big XML files. Like I think it's like a format, and so maybe you could have the XML in source code. Like maybe there's something there, but it seems pretty ugly.
Right. Like it wouldn't be intelligible, the differences between each
Yeah.
version. You're probably just better off, doing there's the whole trope of final last
Yeah.
underscore
Yeah.
v2. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Agent's
so
final version.
there's a whole lot of opportunities here for really any source control based project. So this all runs in GitHub Actions. It integrates really nicely with source code, obviously, because we can pull that in. We can make whatever updates we want. We can do anything with those changes we want, all directly in GitHub Actions.
So cool. It's going to be powerful. I'm excited for that paradigm. I'm spending too much of my own free time geeking out about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cody, for showing us the autonomous Wiki agent here. Really neat demo and something that we're using every day at First Loop.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Have a good day.